and what frustrates me so much is that when I ask, who is your audience? And they want to say everybody. And that is the absolute wrong answer. Hello, my name is Vanessa Abron, the founder of Agency Abron, which is a creative and artistic direction company that also offers marketing, promotions, and public relations services. Your brand is the personality of the company that you are projecting. And it is the aspects of that people identify with to automatically connect it with your company. So a lot of people get confused the difference between marketing, public relations, advertising, branding. Easy way to really identify that is first the umbrella is marketing. Marketing is the umbrella that houses everything else. It houses the brand, it houses public relations, it houses advertising. All of those are all under the umbrella of marketing. So if you want to talk about marketing, marketing isn't separate from PR. PR is under the umbrella of marketing. Advertising is not separate from marketing. It's all under the same umbrella, as well as branding. First, you define what your brand is. Like, what do you want to look like? What do you want to say? What do you want to project? Those are the things that's important. We just talked about earlier. So you define your brand first. And a lot of businesses get caught up on this, and that's fine because your brand can change. I've been in business for 5 years. I'm currently changing my brand as we speak at this very moment. Like, the example of how I describe my business is the first time I really described my business in probably the past month. But we all, so I think people get afraid of like defining their brand because they feel like they're married to it. And you are for for a bit. I guess you can say you're going steady, but that does change and that does evolve. And what that looks like is not written in stone. For example, like when you think about most of your favorite brands, how that logo looks is very different. We went from Kentucky Fried Chicken to now calling it KFC, right? We went from calling it Dunkin' Donuts to now it just being Dunkin'. If you go back and you look at what Dunkin' Donuts looked like in 1980 versus what it looks like right now, it looks very different, right? So it's okay to change and evolve and even to like adjust your mission statement. So define your brand first, because the brand, once you understand what your brand is, it's going to serve as the essence of the communication that you give to the public. So advertising and public relations are two mechanisms that people use to communicate with the public. Advertising is a way that we communicate with the public in a way that is guaranteed, defined, and exactly what we're looking for. So when you have your branding and you create the posters and the flyers and the commercials, whether that's on television, on digital, or radio, it's exactly how you want it to be. You know exactly what the words will be, and you pay certain platforms to showcase this brand on your behalf, and you know that once you pay for that, it's going to be presented at the time, the date, the place, and it's going to look exactly how you want it to be. Public relations, however, then comes in to support all of these activities. So public relations is how I define it I define public relations basically as the relationship that you have with your public and the management of your public reputation. So now you have your brand and you have what you know what you look like, what you sound like, what you feel like, the characteristics of what you're doing. So now you have that. So then you've taken those elements and you created the commercial spots and the sponsorships and and all these paid engagements. So you're making sure that you're being visible. So public relations comes in and it comes to support all of those endeavors to make sure that now it's included in conversations. Because it's one thing to do with advertising, that's usually a one-way communication. Like, this is who I am, this is what I do, poster, this, take it, and people observe it. But now with public relations, you're allowing people to interact with your messaging and with your brand. They all work together. And I think that's so, not one of these is more effective than the others. And I think that's one of the things that I struggle with when I work with clients, is that they think one eliminates the other. Just because you're doing public relations doesn't mean that you shouldn't work on building your brand, or you shouldn't have any sort of advertising or paid campaigns out there. I actually advise against that. And I've actually started being more proactive and turning down clients that aren't doing those things. If you don't have a brand, you probably should not be trying to engage. If you don't have an established brand that you feel comfortable with, at least at the point of movement, then I wouldn't recommend that you start to engage in events and, media relations, because you don't know what the messaging is going to be. You don't know, there's no clear direction on what to communicate with the public, because you're having an identity crisis basically. And so if you do engage in some sort of public relations activity, basically you're going to communicate that you don't know who you are. You're having an identity crisis basically. And so if you do engage in some sort of public relations activity, basically you're going to communicate that you don't know who you are, and that's not a good look, right? One thing that I've noticed when it comes to branding with the company is that a lot of people create identities for their company that they think they want other people to see. So they create these beautiful pictures and these nicely crafted words strung together, and they post it on social media, and they do this outreach, and it's not connecting. That is a part of branding. I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but what happens with that is that they miss a key element of their brand, and it's the essence of why they are doing what they're doing. So for example, I was working with a young lady who has a cosmetics line. And through her cosmetics line, she was putting out the beautiful pictures of the models with her product, and they looked gorgeous, and she had the nice words, and yet the needle wasn't moving. And as I began to talk to her, I realized, I'm like, well, why are you doing this anyway? Like, when I look at your pictures and when I look at these nicely crafted the wordings that you have, it doesn't distinguish you from everyone else who's doing exactly what you're doing. So why should I look at you versus everyone else that's doing the same exact thing that you're doing? And, of course, she couldn't answer the question. So then I went back to the question of, well, why are you doing this? And she started to tell the story about the need of her journey of wanting to feel beautiful and loved. And, of course, beauty is always within, but just sometimes you just need a little pick me up. Sometimes you need a little lipstick or eyeliner, or you want to change your hair or put on lashes. Like, and she wanted to just she wanted to give the audience something to make them feel a little extra beautiful for the days that they didn't. And that wasn't communicated anywhere in those pictures or the words that she had. And I encouraged her. I was like, you have to tell your story. You have to tell the story of the moments when you didn't feel beautiful. And this is why, because you want to make other people feel beautiful, because that's what's going to get people to connect with your brand. People connect with brands not because they look and sound pretty. They connect with brands because they identify with that. It's something about the essence of that company or that product or that service that speaks to them. There's 1,000 people that do public relations and does it really well. Like, I am not knocking my colleagues in this profession. People don't come to me because I'm better at public relations than I am from the rest of my colleagues. They come to me because there's an essence and quality of me and an energy of what I am and how I give service and deliver what they need in a way that my colleagues don't. And we all have that. We all come with a unique DNA that makes us very different from everyone else. So when you create your brand, you really have to make sure you infuse the essence of what makes you you, and what makes what you're doing different from everyone else. And sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just different.
So,
If you research successful brands and successful businesses, you will find out that the majority of them are rooted in some form of pain, a painful experience, a painful process, a painful background, something. There's some element of pain um, in there, and to some, in some instances, the pain is great. It's impactful. In some instances, it's not that impactful, but it inspired them to do something else. And for so long, I think we look at the pretty pictures on Instagram and Facebook and back in the day magazines, and we saw these perfectly curated images, and like, oh my gosh, I want this is what I want. I want to look like that, and that's not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. And what happens is that oftentimes they don't know the story of the pain that got to that beautifully crafted image, why that image looks the way it is and why it's talking to you. Like, let's look at Beyonce, for example. Everyone loves and heralds Beyonce, and she's on a pedestal. And then she comes out with Lemonade, and she talks about how she is, has is having marital problems and was on the brink of divorce, and what that looked like and how she felt. And then everyone looked like, oh my gosh, Beyonce is like me. She also has problems and things like that. Like, I think we look at our pain and the stories of why we do what we do, and we don't want to share them because there's a sense of embarrassment. But why should we have embarrassment? Because everyone does that. Just because we don't talk about it out loud doesn't mean that we all don't go through that similar pain. And you will see that when you start to talk about that pain, that's what people identify with, and that's why they connect with you, because it makes them feel like, not because it's a misery loves company sort of thing, but it makes people feel like they're not alone and that they're understood and that they're connected to something.